suppose, is probably how we should start the show. This is Coach Conversation. My name is Nick Levitt, and ably sat across me, I'm going to point this way because you are on my screen, is Jenny Cody. And this is the first in a new series, a new season, the start of something of who knows where this could go. We might just do 3 of these and then realise that it's awful. But who knows? So welcome, and I shall pass you over to Jenny for a little hello and a bit of a, well, this is what it's about.
Yeah, hey, we're probably going to do it weekly, and then when, we see how things are going, we'll jump in and see if there's more interest. We're going to do hopefully 1 live session a month and then 3 pre-recorded. So we get a chance to dip into some of the topics that you might relate to. And then obviously we more than welcome requests from you. So through our Twitter or YouTube channel, then you can send in any topics or scenarios that have happened, and we'd love to discuss them. I think it's just going to be a discussion, Nick, is it? For 20, 30 minutes a week on different topics that we've either experienced or heard during the week in the roles that we have. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah,
I think really it's the chance just to talk about coaching. Yeah. We've got a variety of experiences on our own kind of journeys that have got us to this far from coaching. And we've probably seen lots of things. We've definitely made lots of mistakes, and ones that many people will probably recognize amongst themselves. And we've probably come across lots of problems that are familiar to lots of people as well. So this was the chance really just to share some of our thoughts, our views. It will be pretty laid back and informal. It definitely won't be over academic. No, is that where we're going with this?
Yeah, chilled out. Like, I think, we live in that world of performance, mainly at the moment in both of our jobs. So sometimes we kind of get wrapped up in different bubbles and different ways of looking, different terminology. And sometimes when I go back to different areas in the pathway or grassroots coaches, they kind of say, just tell it to me in basic terms. How do I solve this problem? Or what does that really mean? And how do you connect the dots? So I think we might be in a position, fortunately enough, to connect some of the dots. And where we don't know, we can bring in some people or signpost some further reading for people to dive into different topics. But yeah, I think on the ground stuff, what's happening, on a Thursday night at 7 o'clock on a pitch, in a random location, what kind of scenarios could come to light that we can discuss, or in a basketball hall, where not enough people turn up, and how do you change your plan? I don't know, any topic could come up knowing us. So yeah, I think just relatable conversations.
Absolutely. So we have a Twitter account, Coach Convo. So at Coach Convo, if you want to track us down on there, you can do. If you want to get in touch with us via the internet, we are also at coachconversation@gmail.com. And this will obviously be on a YouTube channel around Coach Conversation as well. So any thoughts, topics, discussion points, look, you can get hold of us in different ways, as well as our own individual Twitter accounts anyway. So yeah, cool. So right then, coaching.
Yeah.
How's your coaching at the moment? Are you still allowed to do any?
Oh, no, not doing any coaching. Well, maybe virtual coaching. Is that a new thing? Yeah. The latest in the coaching space is coach development, probably from my own work. But to go back to coaching the West Ham stuff, I during the summer took up this role at West Ham, and really the driver behind it was I really missed a team. I really missed being part of a team. And before knowing, like, football wouldn't have been my first sport, but for me, sport is sport. And then I'm not going in with a lens of like the technical stuff. I was going into just being part of a team, part of a buzz, conversations, different people talking about different expertise that they have, and, passions that they have. So the coach, that's still going, and that's great. And that's, a weekly thing for me to pop in, check in with everybody. How's everyone doing? Be part of a training session, start, middle, end kind of thing, and pick up the different scenarios and problem solve as we go. So that's kind of the closest to the ground I have at the moment. And then obviously living vicariously through all the basketball coaches in the world that are still coaching. What about you? What's going on?
Well, I guess the virtual world is still rocking and rolling as well, hence we're here, I suppose, in that kind of virtual space. Who'd have thought, like, you and I a year ago, we'll be recording something in this kind of way, I would have thought it would be really. So my coaching at the moment is on hold. Most of my coaching at the moment is, is it coaching? It's looking after so we don't lose any 6 and 7 year olds on a rugby pitch, of which mainly there's about 25 to 30 of them on a Sunday morning, which is definitely an interesting place to be from a coaching perspective, having coached at a variety of levels and across lots of different age groups. It's a real skill, right? Working with the little ones. Do you think that's different to working with, a ladies team?
Yes and no. I think the age does definitely make a difference. And the biggest thing for me, probably actually, as I'm saying it, I was going to say language, but in the West Ham group, they've got 10 or 11 different international players. So language actually in a different way makes a big impact on how you say things, even like, how's it going? How did you find that? How did you find what? Oh, did you enjoy that? What did you learn? And then going down to the little ones, that's thinking back to kind of school PE days, like you have to think about every little word, short sentences. What message am I looking to get across? How much humor can I bring in? How clear is the message? I'd say, yeah, you can say coaching is coaching, and it is to a certain point, but the language part is key, really, isn't it? Getting that, and the fun part, you being that kind of that gestury kind of person for the young people is important.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think you're spotting about the language, and I'm sure loads of coaches will have had their own experiences of it. But I can still remember in one of the early sessions last year when the kids were kind of 5 and 6, so even younger. And one of the coaches just said, look up to find space. But that's what happens. It's the reality of they take the words literally. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting from a communication perspective. And look, I'll be absolutely clear about this. I know nothing about rugby. I'll watch England play, and I've been to a handful of games, but my knowledge of rugby is nothing. And I'm working with normally about 7 dads. There was one mum last year, but she's not been back this season. I'm not sure why. But there's normally 7 dads, and there's one guy who kind of does the head coach type role, I guess, right. Who's done a few kind of types of courses, but I wouldn't say he's a qualified coach. I think he's done some officials courses. One guy who's a qualified coach in rugby, and then the rest of us are just dads. But most of them have all played rugby. I played one game of rugby at school in my life, and I just realised it was just a silly game, and I wasn't going to play it again. This is not for me. So I'm definitely going in as a novice dad trying to help out. But in theory, right, I should know a little bit about coaching. So yeah, it's a strange kind of place to be at the moment.
Yeah. And then, so the interesting thing there is, right, if you think across a number of different environments, so if you're coaching, I think of a team that I'm involved with, which is a senior men's football team. And they still need to have simple instructions. If you have 30 men on a pitch at 7 o'clock under floodlights, to international players who have, multiple language, and they're trying to make sense of a session plan, or communicating in styles of play, or in the units and who needs what, to, the certain younger age group who need kind of that direct instruction. Of my first experience working with that age group, where I said, okay, everybody go grab a ball. Grab, what a silly word to throw in there. Okay, mass hysteria. My ball, I want the pink one, I want the red one. So yeah, mindful of the kind of the language. And then I think definitely a passion of mine in the conversations I have is how many words then you put in that sentence, or how many sentences. So we're going to do this, this, and this. And then we're going to do that. And then they're kind of going, oh, I forgot the first 2 or 3. So the short, snappy, what do you really want to get done here? Or how do you check if someone understands what you're saying? Like I've given it, you know, we've decided on what we're going to do next and we're exploring something. How long do you stay in it? All of those different instructions could be lost if there's a ramble, you know, if there's too many kind of too many words in it, I guess.
I mean, that's a massively important point. I reckon probably for any coaches, you know, the amount as a player sat there listening to a coach's monologue, as an adult, I'd switch off. Never mind, you know, having the concentration span that my 6-year-old son does, which ain't very long, you know. So I guess how long would you keep that to if you said, right, you know, this is important to kind of retain a player's concentration or an athlete's concentration? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, years ago, I had a coach from America, and he just spoke in like, you know, his sentences were no more than 5 words long. Short, go here, do that. What do you think? Like small little, it's not necessarily they were all kind of directions. I'm not saying it that way, but like there were just 1 or 2 sentences and they were really a short amount of words. So I think he had thought about what he wanted to say and then said it. And so it was more about us as basketball players. And he would sit, observe, gather, and then either have a 1-to-1 or pause and share or in a smaller group. And that led then into the impact at halftime and into how he behaved in games. So because training was never full of his voice, the games then we weren't, you know, we didn't need to hear. We were kind of that, I think you could say that autonomy, like he let us explore different opportunities in training. Then it came to halftime, we problem solved. He'd share some insight, maybe in numbers, maybe in subjective kind of his experience, his observations, and then say, okay, well, how do we solve this problem? Now, we were at a certain level. We had obviously done in training and we were used to this pattern where it wasn't an overload of now go here, now do this, now do that. It was all kind of poised, thought through. He did get crazy sometimes. Like there was an odd board that would be thrown, but I think it's around like thinking about who's in front of you, right? So how much information they can take on. If in case I pick the football team I work with, they've just come off a train from one side of London to another. Loads of people, you know, squished in a train, getting from A to B or driving in heavy traffic. They get out, quickly change, get on the pitch. Like how much space do they have to process loads of instruction? And I know there's people out there who'll say, well, there shouldn't be a lot of instruction. And it's kind of like, what do you need to get done in the session? What do they want to happen? What do they need to happen in the session? But then leading that into a game. So kind of going back to go forward, halftime stuff. How much information can you give at halftime? Why would you give that much? What can they problem solve? Can they identify the problems and share? And I'm talking in a team aspect now, but that's where I'm at, like short, snappy. From my experience, that's how many that positive experience with that American coach led on to me looking more into that over the years and then impacted me as a coach.
I love that phrase that you used in there. Training was never full of his voice. I mean, the amount of coaches I've seen that it was full of their voice. Yeah, I love that. Training was never full of his voice. I'm sure, like, that we may well do an entire show on half times or kind of breaks in play type stuff. But do you think you planned those? Because I'll tell you why. Because there's I think Ed Hall talks about, you know, what we're very good at planning for action on session plans with X's and O's or whatever our sport might be, you know, the whizzy bits of the practice. But do we plan for interaction? And do you think that coach did?
That's a really good question. You know where my mind went straight away was his age. How ageist of me. But it seemed like he had years of thinking about his behavior. And he would openly say in conversations outside the court, I've made mistakes, Jen. Kind of 6'6" guy, had been around in the Hall of Fame, but he would easily turn around and say, Jen, you know, 10 years ago, like, and he'd share that and say, but now I'm at a stage where, and you would get the wiggly finger every so often. So he'd sit there and he'd tilt his glasses and he'd go, and you go, oh my God, here it goes. But even how he set the session up, set the season up, with us, he said, you have 3 sessions where you don't have to give any excuses that you can miss. But after that, then you need to check in with me. After that, then it becomes a concern. Now, is that right? Is it wrong? That's not really where my mind is going. It's that he had thought of different ways to manage different groups, which I think, going back to your question, he definitely thought about how he would be present in a session, how he would like to come across, and realized, I feel it from a player point of view at that time, that we could actually just experience training. He would kind of share some insight, probe with different challenges. The assistant coaches at the time that we were lucky to have would kind of filter out the message to smaller groups. But the few words, you were almost going, you know, what's next? Is there more words coming in the early stage of the season? And then, you know, there wasn't any. And you were like, oh, how do I read this? And he'd have a conversation with you, but it was almost like a big adjustment for me to kind of go, you know, I'm doing okay. I don't need his positive reinforcement all the time, or I don't need to check in and kind of go, is that okay? You know, so yeah, I do think he planned. What's your feeling on that?
Well, I think it's one of those things that should be on coaches' session plans. You know, planning for questions, the kind of questions that you want to ask, linked to the kind of outcome that you're trying to create. Yeah. So, you know, and again, you know, this is episode 1, and you know, this could go anywhere with lots of different directions. But you know, if you're doing a session and the aim is around creating decision-making players or athletes, you need to plan your questions that enable them to be able to think and consider those questions. So if you're using command style, autocratic type interventions, you're not going to get decision making, because you're breaking that, you're telling them what to do. So you know, if I was doing that and it was a session around creativity and I wanted the players to explore things, it would definitely be, you know, try as many different ways as you can to find getting the ball from this area into this area, or what different ways can you find to beat a 3v2 in this space or that space. So, you know, I wanted them to be really divergent with their thinking. Yeah. But that came down to some of the questions that I had to plan. But if I went with right, you need to move the ball from here into here like this, doing this, I narrow that straight. Well, there's no thinking for them. So yeah, so I think it's important for coaches, right? But again, it's an important piece of knowledge.
Yeah, and you've hit the nail on the head. So there's a planning side and there's a being mindful side. And we're not saying you're at the extreme where you're whipping out video cameras and mics just yet to video and listen to yourself. In a really basic form, you're going to a session being mindful that there needs to be pauses. But here's a scenario. Say a coach then listens to this session and goes, right, I am going to think about how much I speak or how much I don't speak in a session. But when I ask a question, nobody answers, or just the captain because they feel obliged. How do you get it from that stage to being kind of fluid, or to encourage more people to speak? What would you think? What would your advice be?
Yeah, it's a common thing, I think, with coaches. As soon as you bring the kids in, who speaks, you know, or the grown-ups in your case, you know, who speaks? Well, it's the confident ones, it's the loud ones, it's the ones that always speak. Probably don't put their hand up, they probably just answer. And then who does the coach go to for the answers? Well, often they'll go straight to the one that they know will probably give them the right answer. And in fact, you know, having different tactics and strategies about how you pull out information. So some kids and some adults won't be great at being put on the spot and asked a question, because they might want to think about it for a little bit. So if you've got players or athletes that you work with that are like that and a bit more reflective, you know, again, that comes down to your planning. So, you know, if you were that player while the game was going on, I might have a wander past you and say, Jen, right, next 5 minutes, I want you just to think about this, because when we come back together as a group, I'm going to ask you to feed back in. So I'm not putting you on the spot in 5 minutes time and you've not had time to think about it. You've had a little bit of time to go, right, okay, so what is important, or what do I need to think? So finding those different tactics are important. one of the ones that I often use was a no hands up. And that sometimes can put people on the spot, but it was deliberate when you did it, because you didn't always go back to the same people. Or you get those kind of bounce, pause kind of methods where you can kind of bounce answers around different people. And I'm sure we can get into some of those strategies as we go through this as well. But yeah, loads of different things again that we can explore. And even with, the 20 minutes or so that we've been chatting now, it's gone off in lots of different tangents, but I can see that being a bit of a theme with
yeah, definitely, yeah,
these conversations. Yeah,
that's a really good, I mean, in that space alone, you have a coach that's going to a session now that thinks, well, they're not a chatty bunch, whatever age they are, or the same people. They just want to shut me up. I'm asking the questions. Oh, how do you do this? I'll answer to get a solver, either the coach or the, as you said. But I love that there's just, you've hit on like different ways of asking, going into a one-to-one, prepping in advance, or even just asking the question to get them thinking. So if you do or don't ask them, at least they've had time to process it. And it's something about just normalizing that, even if it's at the end of the session. How did that session go? And holding the silence. And then waiting until 4 or 5 people. I went into a room, God, it was about 2 months ago, and the team had a tough weekend playing. And I went in, I said, how's everybody? And he had 4 or 5 people. Yeah, good, yeah. And I just held it. We waited for a couple more, and then we waited for a couple more. And after probably about 8 or 9 minutes, then everybody had fed in. And what I noticed is the further on we went with the how are you, more people came away from the I'm good, I'm fine. And they went to, I'm a bit frustrated. Or, yeah, all right, but, and I got an extra sentence. So it was awkward. And a few were kind of like nudging others to like answer, but that was really interesting, because that's a group of adults and you kind of assume that people are used to having those conversations. Whereas you might, with a younger group, pay more attention to that and assist them or support them or have a little joke or a smile. And with adults, from my experience, some coaches tend to assume that you get that back from adults because they're used to, but not everybody. Even coming to university students that I've seen, like, they're not used to having that dialogue and been asked kind of openly, what do you genuinely think about this session? Or how do you feel about that position? Or does this tactic work for you? Like, so normalizing the questions and not being afraid of a bit of silence might help.
Yeah, it's having all of these different things in your toolbox, right?
Yeah.
And then if you only ever use one approach, I think, it's not gonna work all of the time, and you have to kind of mix and match, and it's a bit of variety for the kids. And sometimes it might be just like, here's the question, off you go and show me. Sometimes it might be just in 2s or 3s to feedback with each other and not across the whole group. And so yeah, there's lots of different kind of tactics and strategies that we can kind of start to explore. But hey, none of this was what we were going to talk about today.
No.
And again, I think that may well be a regular thing, because one of the things that I said that was quite a big impact for me this week, and we'll try and make sure it's topical each week, and we're talking about things that have come up, etc. Was yesterday was Diego Maradona, and gosh, this is giving me goosebumps now. Like he changed my world. Mexico '86. I was kind of into football a little bit, but Mexico '86, I was 9. Just, the man was an absolute genius. And I'm ignoring the first goal against England. I'm over that. But just absolutely mesmerizing. And of course, look, he has many flaws off the pitch, and but what this man could do with the football was incredible. And there was a great clip that Gary Lineker talked yesterday about what he saw Maradona doing in a warm up by literally just smashing the ball as high as he could, and as it came down, just smashing it straight back up in the air and doing it again and again. And Lineker said he did it 13 times, and they all went back. I think he was playing at Barcelona at the time, Gary. He said they went back to Barcelona, and the most anybody could do was 3. And and they were scampering around after it. And the guy was just incredible. So he was definitely up there as a role model for me as a footballer. But role models are big on helping people play sport, right? Is that something that you would kind of concur with?
You know, that's a lovely example. And I was watching some of the news stuff either on social media and the TV, and I was getting emotional just watching the passion. Like the interviews they were doing with people in Argentina was like, we've lost a leader, we've lost a God, we've lost, you know, spanning across people who, I mean, they didn't go into the depth of who the people were, but they like, not all of them were footballers. But it's the passion and the impact on, you know, a whole community, a whole world of sport in and out of sport, actually. So yeah, it was really emotional. And role models then came to mind, thinking of even that conversation. If Gary Lineker is saying, as an adult in a professional sport, they wanted to copy him. They wanted to take what he could do and say, oh, let's see what we can do. And I think you posted the clip and I had a look at it and I was like, wow, if they could only do it 3 times or 4 times and they, you know, were trying to be as cool as he was and not move as much. There's definitely role models for me in different spaces. Like when I joined the Wildcats basketball club, I was young, I was only 15, I'd made the international team. And so then you progress to the senior team kind of for better training and exposure to better players. And they were the best team in the country. And there was this player, and why she was a role model, Gillian Hayes, for me, was just her work ethic. And you'd hear all the sacrifices she's made. So I related that to kind of the work ethic side of things as well. You know, I didn't go to her graduation or a Debs or all of the events that would happen because this training was on and that training was on. So passionate, and every training session she brought her A game. She didn't bring her friendliness. She didn't bring her, you know, her like, hey, how you doing? You get that off the white line. Cross the white line. Why aren't you working hard? Rebounding, elbow swinging. So you either got in and muscled up or you got out of the way. So 15 going into that space, I was like, wow. And she was local. She had scholarship offers all around the world, but, you know, she wanted to play with the best team in the country, with the best group that she called her family. And she's gone back into coaching. Her kids are playing internationally, and role model came to my mind, and I was like, that's amazing. There's been loads of people from a coaching space as well, but that just brought me right back to why she was a role model, because you bounce around that word and intertwine it with leadership. And yeah, she was a leader, but she wasn't the captain for all the time, and she wasn't somebody who I'd label as a leader in the general sense, but the work ethic, the execution, the discipline, and then that kind of that ability to connect to other players after the game. It was really interesting because I perceived it going in that I had to be the nasty tough. I'm going to be tough. But then she was friends with everyone off the court, but she would kill people on the court, you know? Yeah. So she was definitely somebody for me that stood out over the years. That I did completely different position, never had the height, never had the stature that she had, but I wanted to be her. I wanted to be like her, and that work ethic, and to have that reputation of being just an awesome Wildcat, you know, a great basketball player. It's funny.
I think this is what's going to happen, right, in this program. So you're going to say stuff like that, and then I'm going to think, right, how in talent pathways do they do that? Do they get the senior athletes down the pathway to be that role model for 15-year-old Jenny? You know, how do they plan to do that? How do you do that in your system that, you know, that gets just like an adult who is really cool or really good to influence the young people in a different way, so that they've got someone to aspire to be? And how do they do it deliberately to make sure it happens? And I'm sure there's loads of great stuff going on out there, but how do coaches set that up to enable that? Like, this is what's going to happen, is my head's just going to go off all over the place.
Well, I think just immediately connecting to that, the Basketball England program that I'm part of with the coaches, that's a conversation that I feel there's a vibrancy around. Now, listen, it links basketball and basketball, so I will have a lens for sure. But conversations that has come up is there's a passion to want to be visible, to not just as a coach, but even people who are still playing and trying to coach. They want to be that role model. They want to show people that, yeah, you can coach as well. You can coach any age group. You can play till any age that you want to play. And if you can show that you're having fun or you're working really hard, somebody who you may not be aware of is watching you. It's like that saying of, dress for an interview when you go out, because you don't know when the next interview is going to be or who's watching. But that's the kind of vibrancy I'm getting back from this group of coaches who are, yes, on a coaching program, so really interested in their development, but a buzz around, how can I give back to this sport? So I do think that's a wandering conversation that we'll have across multitudes of sports to see, not necessarily in gender, but like, how can those people who are really passionate about a sport become that visible person that says, oh yeah, here's a story of when I did that, or here's me working hard doing this, or, you know, but yeah, I'm getting passionate now, so I'm moving the hands more.
No, I think we're already at the kind of the rough time that we thought that we would go for with this with each week. And again, I think it would be pretty clear that we could go for a while with a variety of different topics. So so yeah, I think that let's sign off from there. And even if it's just me and you that watches this, then again, you know, I'm always happy with these kind of conversations because I learn stuff regardless. So so look, you know, we'll endeavour to try and get this up on the YouTube channel. At Coach Convo is where you can find us on Twitter, and coachconversation@gmail.com if you want to get in touch and drop us some topics or problems and things that you want us to kind of throw around and discuss. And we won't necessarily give you the answers, but we can throw them about and see what comes out from it. Yeah.
Wicked. Yeah.
Awesome. Right.
We'll
catch you soon.
Bye.